straight to that all-important Berkshire Hathaway AGM, which for the first time in history is live-streamed online. Let's cut across live and listen to none other than the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett.
This meeting simultaneously translated into Mandarin, and that poses certain problems for me and Charlie, because I'm not sure how sensible all our comments will come out once translated into Mandarin. In fact, I'm not so sure how sensible they come out initially sometimes, but we're delighted to have people around the world joining us. Now, the drill today is that I'll make a couple of introductions and we'll show a couple of slides, and then we'll go on to questions from both our two panels and from the audience. We'll rotate them. And we'll do that until about noon. Actually, about 11:45, I'll give you a rundown on a bet that was made that we report on every year. But then I'll also, in connection with that, explain, and it ties in with it, what I really think is probably the most important investment lesson in the world. So we'll have that about 11:45. And I hope that keeps you around. And then we'll break at noon for an hour for lunch. We'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. We'll proceed until 3:30 with questions. We'll then adjourn for 15 minutes, and at 3:45 convene the formal meeting. I'd like to just make a couple of introductions. I hope Carrie Silva is here. Do we have a spotlight? Carrie puts this whole meeting together. There she is, Wonder Woman. Carrie joined us. Carrie joined us as a receptionist about 6 years ago, and I just kept throwing more and more problems at her. And she put together the 50th anniversary book, which we've actually expanded further this year. We have a revised edition. Charlie and I autographed 100 of them. We interspersed them among the group being sold. And Carrie, while doing that, she also had a young baby girl, her second baby, late in January. But then she's gone ahead to put on this whole annual meeting. It's a remarkable achievement, and I really want to thank her. It's been terrific. Actually, we have one surprise guest. I think my youngest great-grandchild, who will be about 7 months old, is also here today. And if he happens to break out crying a lot, and don't let it bother you, it's just his mother is explaining to him my views on inherited wealth. And we also have our directors with us, and they're here in the front row. I'll introduce them. If they'll stand when introduced, withhold your applause, no matter how extreme the urge to applaud them individually. And when we've finished, then you can go wild. First of all, Howard Buffett, Steve Burke, Sue Decker, Bill Gates, Sandy Gottesman, Charlotte Guyman, Tom Murphy, Ron Olson, Walter Scott, and Merle Whitmer. And that's our wonderful group. Now we just have 2 slides to show you now. The first one is a preliminary summary figures for the first quarter. And you'll notice that insurance underwriting, these are after-tax figures by category are down somewhat. The basic underwriting at GEICO is actually improving, but we had some important hailstorms in Texas toward the end of the quarter. We've actually had some since the end of the quarter, too. So there were more cat losses in the first quarter than last year. And the railroad earnings are down significantly, and railroad car loadings throughout the industry, all of the major railroads, were down significantly in the first quarter and probably will continue to be down, almost certainly will continue to be down the balance of the year. We have two companies which we added to the manufacturing, service, and retailing field, Precision Castparts and Duracell, but they were added during the...
Today, the company has changed its strategy. It now invests in companies that need tons of capital expenditures, are overregulated, and earn lower returns on equity capital. Why did this happen?
Yeah, well, it's one of the problems of prosperity. The ideal business is one that takes no capital, but yet grows. And there are a few businesses like that, and we own some. But we are not able... We'd love to find one that we could buy for 10 or 20 or $30 billion that was not capital intensive. And we may, but it's harder, and that does hurt us in terms of compounding earnings growth. Because obviously if you have a business that grows and gives you a lot of money every year and doesn't take it, it isn't required in its growth, you get a double-barreled effect from the earnings growth that occurs internally without the use of capital, and then you get the capital it produces to go and buy other businesses. And See's Candy was a good example of that. I've used that. Back when the newspaper business was good, our Buffalo newspaper, for example, was a good example of that. The Buffalo newspaper was making, at one time, $40 million a year and had no capital requirements. So we could take that whole $40 million and go buy something else with it. But increasing capital acts as an anchor on returns in many ways, and one of the ways is that it drives us into, just in terms of availability, it drives us into businesses that are much more capital intensive. You just saw a slide, for example, on Berkshire Hathaway Energy, where we just announced, just in the last couple of weeks, we announced a $3.6 billion investment coming up in wind generation. And we pledged overall to have $30 billion in renewables. Anything that Berkshire Hathaway Energy does, anything that BNSF does, takes lots of money. We get decent returns on capital, but we don't get the extraordinary returns on capital that we've been able to get in some of the businesses we require that are not capital intensive. As I mentioned in the annual report, we have a few businesses that actually earn 100% a year on true invested capital. And clearly that's a different sort of operation than something like Berkshire Hathaway Energy, which may earn 11 or 12% on capital, and that's a very decent return, but it's a different sort of animal than the business that very low capital intensity. Charlie?
Well, when our circumstances changed, we changed our minds.
Slowly and reluctantly.
In the early days, quite a few times we bought a business that was soon producing 100% per annum on what we paid for it and didn't require much reinvestment. If we'd been able to continue doing that, we would have loved to do it. But when we couldn't, we went to Plan B. And Plan B is working pretty well, and in many ways I've gotten so I sort of prefer it. How about you, Warren?
Yeah, that's true. When something's forced on you, you might as well prefer it. We knew that was going to happen, and the question is, does it lead you from what is a sensational result to a satisfactory result, and we're quite happy with a satisfactory result. The alternative would be to go back to working with very tiny sums of money, and that really hasn't gotten a lot of serious discussion between Charlie and me. Okay, from the analyst group, Jonathan Brandt.
Hi, Warren. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for coming.
My first question is about Precision Cast Parts. Besides your confidence in its talented CEO, Mark Donegan, what in particular do you like about their business that gave you the confidence to pay a historically high multiple? Are there ways Precision can be even more successful as essentially a private company? For instance, are there long-term investments to support client programs or acquisitions that Precision can make now that they couldn't realistically have done as a publicly traded entity?
Yeah, we completed the acquisition of Precision Cast Parts at the end of January this year. We made the deal last August, and you covered the most important asset in your question. Mark Donegan, who runs Precision Cast Parts, is an extraordinary manager. I mean, Charlie and I have seen a lot of managers over the years, and I would almost rank Mark as one of a kind. I mean, he is doing extremely important work in terms of primarily making aircraft parts. I would say that there's certainly no disadvantages to him to be working as and for that company to be a subsidiary of Berkshire and not be a public company. And I think he would say, and I think Charlie and I would agree with him, that over time there could be some significant advantages. For one thing, he can spend 100% of his time now on figuring out better things to do with aircraft engines. And it was always his first love to be thinking about that, and he did spend most of his time, but he also had to spend some time, explaining quarterly earnings to analysts and perhaps negotiating bank lines and that sort of thing. So his time, like all of our managers, can be spent exactly on what makes the most sense to them in their business. Mark does not have to come ever to Omaha to put on some show for me in terms of justifying $1 billion acquisition or planned investment. He doesn't have to waste his time on anything that isn't productive. And running a public company, you do waste your time on quite a bit of stuff that isn't productive. So I would say we've taken the main asset of Precision Cast and made him, in this case, even more valuable to the company. In terms of acquisitions, Precision's always made a number of them, but as being part of Berkshire, there's really no limitations on what can be done. So there again, his canvas has been broadened, enlarged with the acquisition by Berkshire. I see no downside whatsoever. If he needs capital, I've got an 800 number, and he wasn't paying much of a dividend before, but he doesn't have to pay any dividend now. And Precision Cast will do better under Berkshire than it would have independently, although it would have done very, very well independently. Charlie?
Yeah, well, in the early days, we used to make wise-ass remarks, and Warren would say, we buy a business that an idiot could manage, because sooner or later an idiot will. And we did buy some businesses like that in the early days, and they were widely available. Of course we'd prefer to do that, but the world has gotten harder, and we had to learn new and more powerful ways of operating. A business like Precision Cast Parts requires a very superior management that's going to stay superior for a long time. And we gradually have done more and more and more of that, and it's simply amazing how well it works. I think to some extent we've gotten almost as good at picking the superior managers as we were in the old days of picking the no-brainer businesses.
Yeah, we would love to find, we won't be able to find them because they're very rare birds, but we would love to find another 3 or 4 of a similar type to precision cast parts where they forever are going to be producing something where quality is enormously important, where the customers depend very heavily on them, when there's contracts that extend over many years, and where people don't simply just take the low bid in order to get this gadget of one sort or another. It's very important that you have somebody there that has enormous skill running the business, and their reputation among aircraft manufacturers, engine manufacturers, is absolutely unparalleled. Okay, now we go to the audience, and we'll go up to section 1. And if you'll give your name and where you're from, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gaspar. I'm Spanish and I come from London. I admire you both in many ways, but I would like to know that when looking backwards, what would you have done differently in life in your search for happiness?
Well, I'm 85 and I can't imagine anybody any happier than I am. So by accident or whatever, I'm sitting here eating exactly what I like to eat, doing in life exactly what I love to do with people I love. So it really doesn't get any better than that. And I did decide fairly early in life that my favorite employer was myself, and I think that presented. I've managed to avoid really aggravation of almost any sort. Really, if you or those around you that you love have health problems or something, I mean, that is a real tragedy, and there's not much you can do about it except it. But Charlie and I have really been blessed. I mean, here Charlie is 92, 85, and he's doing every day something that he finds fascinating. I think he probably finds what he is doing at 92 as interesting, as fascinating, as rewarding, as socially productive, as any period you could pick in his life. And so we've been extraordinarily lucky. We've been, we're lucky it's a partnership. It's more fun doing things as a partnership. So I've got no complaints. It'd be very churlish of me to have any kind of complaint. And I would say if you're talking about business life, I don't think I would have started with a textile company. Charlie?
Well, looking back, I don't regret that I didn't make more money or become better known or any of those things. I do regret that I didn't wise up as fast as I could have. But there's a blessing in that too. Now that I'm 92, I still have a lot of ignorance left to work on.
Okay, Becky, quick.
This question comes from Solomon Ackerman, who's in Frankfurt, Germany. He wants to know why Berkshire has significantly sold down their holdings in Munich Re, which is the world's biggest reinsurance company based in Germany, while sticking with their reinsurance operations within Berkshire, like Berkshire Hathaway Reinsurance and General Re. Would you reduce exposure to Berkshire Hathaway Reinsurance and General Re if they were listed companies? And he's hoping that this can bring out some of your insights as to what's happening in the reinsurance business right now.
Yeah, I said in the annual report that I thought it was very likely that the reinsurance business would not be as good in the next 10 years as it has been in the last 10 years. I may be wrong on that, but that's just a judgment based on seeing the competitive dynamics of the reinsurance business now versus 10 or 20 years ago. Both Munich, we sold our entire holdings, which were substantial, of Munich Re and Swiss Re. We owned about 3% of Swiss Re, and we owned more than 10% of Munich Re. And last year, we sold those two holdings. They're fine companies. They're well-managed companies. I like the people that run them. I think their business, the business of the reinsurance companies generally, is less attractive for the next 10 years than it has been for the last 10 years. In part, that's because what's happened to interest rates. A significant portion of what you earn in insurance comes from investment of the float, and both of those companies, and for that matter almost all of the reinsurance industry, is somewhat more restricted in what they can do with their float because they don't have this huge capital cushion that Berkshire has, and also because they don't have this great amount of unrelated earning power that Berkshire has. Berkshire has more leeway in what it can do simply because it does have capital that's many times what its competitors have, and it also has earning power coming from a whole variety of unrelated areas unrelated to insurance. So it was not a negative judgment in any way on those two companies. It was not a negative judgment on their managements, but it was at least a mildly negative judgment on the reinsurance business. Now, we have the ability at Berkshire to actually rearrange to a degree. We are certainly affected by industry factors, but we have more flexibility in modifying business models, and we've operated that way over the years in insurance generally and in particularly in reinsurance. So a Munich, a Swiss, all the major reinsurance companies except for us is pretty well tied to a given type of business model. They don't really have as many options in terms of where capital gets deployed or something. They have to continue down the present path, and I think they'll do fine, but I don't think they will do as fine in the next 10 years as they have in the last 10. And I don't think if we played the same game as we were playing the last 10, we would do as well. But we do have considerably more flexibility in terms of how we conduct all of our insurance operations, but particularly in reinsurance. We have an extra string to our bow that the rest of the industry doesn't have. The amount of capital that's come in to the reinsurance business, it is no fun running a traditional reinsurance company and having money come in, particularly if you're in Europe, and have money come in and look around you for investment choices and find out that a great many of the things that you were buying a few years ago now have negative yields. The whole idea of float is that it's supposed to be invested at a positive rate, and a fairly substantial positive rate. And that game has been over for a while, and it looks like it'll be at least unattractive, if not terrible, for a considerable period in the future. Charlie?
Yeah, there's a lot of new capacity in reinsurance, and there's a lot of very heavy competition. A lot of people from finance have come over into reinsurance, and all the old competitors remain too. That's different from precision cast parts, where most of the customers would be totally crazy to hire some other supplier because precision cast parts is so much more reliable and so much better. Of course, we like the place with more competitive advantage. We're learning.
To put it in terms of economics 101, and then basically in reinsurance, supply has gone up and demand has not gone up. And some of the supply is driven by investment managers who would like to establish something offshore where they don't have to pay taxes. And reinsurance is sort of the easiest what you might call beard behind which to actually engage in money management in a friendly tax jurisdiction. And you can set up a reinsurance operation with very few people by taking large chunks of what brokers may offer. It's not the greatest reinsurance in the world, and a couple of the operations that have done that have proven that statement to be right. But nevertheless, it is a very, very easy way to have a disguised investment operation in a friendly tax jurisdiction. But that becomes supply in the reinsurance field, and supply has gone up relative to demand, and it looks to me like that will continue to be the case. And couple that with the poor returns on float, and it's not as good a business as it was. Now we'll talk to an insurance man about it. Cliff Gallen.
Thank you. In terms of growth and profitability, GEICO really got whooped by Progressive Direct over the last year. In 2015, Progressive Direct's auto business grew policy count by 9.1%, GEICO only 5.4%. And in terms of profitability, the combined ratio at Progressive was a 95.1 and GEICO's was a 98.0. Is this evidence that Progressive's investments in technology like Snapshot, investments that GEICO has spurned, is it making a difference in a time of difficult loss trends? Why is GEICO suddenly losing to Progressive Direct?
Yeah, well, I would say this, over the last, well, I forget what year it was we passed Progressive and what year it was we passed Allstate, but GEICO's growth rate in the first quarter was not as high as in the past couple of first quarters, but it was quite satisfactory. Now, the first quarter is by far the best quarter for growth. But last year, both frequency, how often people had accidents, and severity, which is the cost per accident, in other words, just how much those accidents cost you, both of those went up quite suddenly and substantially. And Progressive's figure showed that they were hit by that less than Allstate and GEICO and some others. But I don't think you'll see necessarily those same trends this year. It's an interesting thing. Last year, for the first time in I don't know how many years, the number of deaths in auto accidents per 100 million miles went up. Now, if you go back to the mid-1930s, there were almost 15 people killed per 100 million miles driven. It got down to just slightly over 1, from 15 to 1. You had roughly as many people killed in auto accidents in the mid-1930s, about 33,000 a year, as we had last year, or the year before, when people drove almost 15 times as many miles. Cars have gotten far, 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 far safer. And it's a good thing, because if we'd had the same rate of deaths from auto accidents as we had in the 30s relative to miles driven, we would have had over 500,000 people die last year from auto accidents instead of a figure closer to 40,000. But last year, for the first time, there was more driving, and I think there was more distracted driving. So you really had this uptick in frequency and more important, in severity. GEICO has adjusted its rates. As I mentioned, my own prediction would be that the underwriting margins at GEICO will be better this year than last year, although you never know when catastrophes are coming along. March and April have had a lot of cat activity. I made a bet a long time ago on a mental one on the GEICO model versus the Progressive model, and as I say, they were significantly ahead of us in volume a few years back, and we passed them, and we passed Allstate, and as I put in the annual report, I hope on my 100th birthday that the GEICO people announced to me that they passed State Farm. But I have to do my share on that too by getting to 100. So we'll see what happens on that particular one. Charlie?
Well, I don't think it's a tragedy that some competitor got a little better ratio from one period. Geico's quadrupled its market share since we bought all of it.
Quintupled, yeah.
Quintupled, all right. I don't think we should worry about the fact that somebody else had a good quarter.
Yeah. I think it's far more sure that Geico will pass State Farm someday than that I'll make it to 100, I'll put it that way. Okay, we'll go to the shareholder from Station 2.
Greetings to all of you from the Midwest of Europe. I'm Norman Rentrop from Bonn, Germany, a shareholder since 1992. My question is about the future of salesmanship in our companies. Warren, you have always demonstrated a heart for direct selling. When we met you in the barber shop, you immediately offered to write insurance for us.
That's true.
Now,
they were all huddled down there in the barber shop, and there wasn't going to be any tornado, so I told them if they give me $1, they can go upstairs, and if anything happened to them, I'd pay them, I forget, $1 million or something of the sort.
Now, we see with the rise of Amazon.com and others a shift from push marketing to pull marketing, from millions of catalogs having been sent out in the past to now consumers searching on what they are looking for. What is your take on how this shift from push to pull marketing will affect our companies?
Well, Norman, the development you refer to is huge. I mean, really huge. And it isn't just Amazon, but Amazon is a huge part of it. And it isn't just Amazon, but Amazon is a huge part of it. And what they've accomplished in a fairly short period of time and continue to accomplish is remarkable. The number of satisfied customers they've developed, and we don't make any decision involving even the manufacturing of goods, the retailing, whatever it is, without thinking long and hard about what the world will look like in 5 or 10 or 20 years with that powerful trend, really hugely powerful trend that you just described. So we don't look at that as something where we're going to try and beat them at their own game. You know, they're better than we are at that. And so Charlie and I are not going to out Bezos by a long shot. But we are going to think about that. It does not worry us, obviously, with the precision cast. But it doesn't worry us in terms of the overwhelming majority of our businesses. But it is a huge economic trend that 20 years ago was not on anybody's radar screen, and lately has been on everybody's radar screen, and many of them have not, including us in a few areas, have not figured the way to either participate in it or to counter it. The Geico is a good example of a company that, in an industry that had to adjust to change, and some people made the change better than others. We were slow on the internet. The phone had worked so well for us, and this traditional advertising, and the phone had worked so well that there's always a resistance to think about new possibilities. When we saw what was happening on the internet, we jumped in with both feet, and with mobile and whatever. But there are the nature of capitalism is somebody's always trying to figure, if you've got a good business, they're always trying to figure out how to take it away from you and improve on it. And the effect, I would say just of Amazon, but others that are playing the same game, the effect on industry, the full effect is far from having been seen. I mean, it is a big force, and it already has disrupted plenty of people, and it will disrupt more. I think Berkshire is quite well situated. For one thing, one big advantage we have is we didn't ever see ourselves as starting out in one industry. I mean, we went into department stores, but we didn't think of ourselves as department store guys, or we didn't think of ourselves as steel guys or tire guys or anything of that sort. So we've thought of ourselves as having capital to allocate. If you start with a given industry focus and you spend your whole time working on a way to make a better tire or whatever it may be, I think it's hard to have the flexibility of mind that you have if you just think you have a hopefully large and growing pile of capital, and trying to figure out what is the best next move that you can make with that capital. And I think we do have a real advantage that way. But I think Amazon's got a real advantage too, in this intense focus on having, hundreds of millions of generally very happy customers getting very quick delivery of something that they want to get promptly, and they want to shop the way they shop. And if I owned a bunch of shopping malls or something like that, I would be thinking plenty hard about what they might look like 10 or 20 years from now. Charlie?
Well, I would say that we failed so thoroughly in retailing when we were young that we pretty well avoided the worst troubles when we were old. I think net Berkshire has been helped by the internet. The help at Geico has been enormous, and it's contributed greatly to the huge increase in market share. And our biggest retailers are so strong that they'll be among the last people to have troubles from Amazon.
I didn't get that $1 from you, Norman, actually, after I gave you that wonderful advice. Andrew?
Thank you, Warren. Great to see you today. Got a lot of questions on this particular topic, and this question is a particularly pointed one. Warren, for the last several years at this meeting, you've been asked about the negative health effects of Coca-Cola products, and you've done a masterful job dodging the question by telling us how much Coke you drink personally. Statistically, you may be the exception. According to a peer-reviewed study by Tufts University, soda and sugary drinks may lead to 184,000 deaths among adults every year. The study found that sugar-sweetened beverages contributed to 133,000 deaths from diabetes, 45,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease, 6,450 deaths from cancer. Another shareholder wrote in about Coke, noted that you declined to invest in the cigarette business on ethical grounds, despite once saying, quote, it was a perfect business because it costs a penny to make, sell it for $1, it's addictive, and there's fantastic brand loyalty. Again, removing your own beverage consumption from the equation. Please explain directly why we Berkshire Hathaway shareholders should be proud to own Coke.
Yeah, I think people confuse the amount of calories consumed. I mean, I happen to elect to consume about 700 calories a day from Coca-Cola. So I'm about 1/4 Coca-Cola, roughly. I'm not sure which quarter, and I'm not sure we want to pursue the question. But I think if you decide that sugar generally is something that the human race shouldn't have, I think the average person consumes something like 150 pounds of dry weight sugar a year, 125 pounds. I mean, what's in Coca-Cola largely, where the calories come from, is sugar. I elect to get my 26 or 2,700 calories a day from things that make me feel good when I eat them. And that's been my sole test. It wasn't a test that my mother necessarily thought was great, or my grandfather, but there are over 1.9 billion 8-ounce servings of some Coca-Cola drink. Now, they have an enormous range of products, I mean, there are a few that are called Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, and that sort of thing. But they have literally thousands of products. 1.9 billion, that's, what is that, that's 693 billion, 500 million 8-ounce servings a year, except it's a leap year. That's almost 100 8-ounce servings per capita for 7 billion people in the world every year. And that's been going on since 1886. And I would find quite spurious the fact that somebody says if you're eating 3,500 or so calories a day and you're consuming 27 or 800, and some of the 3,500 is Coca-Cola to lay it any particular obesity related illnesses on the Coca-Cola you drink. You have the choice of consuming more than you use. I mean, and I make a choice to eat or to get 700 calories from this. I like fudge a lot, peanut brittle, and I am a very, very, very happy guy. And I don't know. I think, and I'm serious about this, I think if you were happy every day, it may be hard to measure, but I think you're going to live longer as well. So there may be a compensating factor. And I really wish I'd had a twin, and that twin had eaten broccoli his entire life, and we both consumed the same number of calories. I know I would have been happier. And I think the odds are fairly good I would have lived longer. I think Coca-Cola is a marvelous product. I mean, if you consume 3,500 or 4,000 calories a day and live a normal life in terms of your metabolism, something's going to go wrong with your body at some point. But if you balance out the calories so that you don't become obese, I have not seen evidence that convinces me that I'll make it. It'll be more likely I reach 100 if I suddenly switch to water and broccoli. Incidentally, a friend of mine, R.J. Miller, a remarkable man, born about 100 miles from here west, 8th child, near Shelby, Nebraska. He said Shelby's population was 596 and it never changed because every time some girl had a baby, a guy had to leave town. It was a very stable. But R.J. went on to be president of Ford Motor Company from this farm near Shelby, and he had his 100th birthday on March 4th of this year. So I went out to see R.J. for his birthday on March 4th, and R.J. told me that there were 10,000 men in the United States that had lived to be 100 or greater, and there were 45,000 women that were 100 or greater. So I came back and I checked that on the internet. I went to the census figures, and sure enough, that is the ratio. There's 10,000 men over 100 roughly and 45,000 women. So if you really want to improve your longevity prospects, I mean, a guy in my position, you have a sex change. I mean, you're 4.5 times more likely to get to be 100. That sounds like one of those studies that people put out. It's just a matter of fact, folks. I think I'll have Charlie go first, though, on that one. Charlie, do you have any comments?
Well,
have some fun.
I like the peanut brittle better than the Coke, but I drink a lot of Diet Coke, and I think the people who ask questions like that one always make one ghastly error that's really inexcusable. They measure the detriment without considering the advantage. Well, that's really stupid. That's like saying we should give up air travel through airlines because 100 people die a year in air crashes or something. That would be crazy. The benefit is worth the risk. And if every person has to have about 8 or 10 glasses of water every day to stay alive, and it's pretty cheap and sensible and improves life to add a little extra flavor to your water and a little stimulation and a little calories if you want to eat that way, there are huge benefits to humanity in that, and it's worth having some disadvantage. We ought to have almost a law in the editorial, I'm sounding like Donald Trump, where these people shouldn't be allowed to cite the defects without citing the offsetting advantage. It's immature and stupid.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.